Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From Cardinals headquarters, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Yes, we are laboring on Labor Day, but there is work to be done. This is week one of the 2018 regular season. That's right, the first practice earlier on this Monday. The 53-man roster is set, 10-man practice squad. MJ, we are ready to roll.
No days off. No days off. Now, we did have a couple days off over the weekend, but now we're in regular season mode.
Yeah, just right around the corner. We've been waiting for this. September 9th, the Washington Redskins visit University of Phoenix Stadium for a 1:25 kickoff. And yes, the team, your 2018 Arizona Cardinals, we now know who those players are.
Yeah, and we're going to break the game down, obviously, throughout the course of the week. But on paper, we got two of the most accurate quarterbacks going against each other. Alex Smith, and the Cardinals would have had an interest in him if he was available in the offseason. Of course, they make the trade. You know, Cousins goes to Minnesota. But between Bradford and Alex Smith, we're talking one of the top 5 accurate quarterbacks in the NFL, so it should be a great matchup, at least going into the game.
Both quarterbacks in unfamiliar places as far as where we're used to seeing them, but that is all ahead throughout the entire week. But right now, let's take off on this Monday, set the stage on what's ahead on this show. Outside of Larry Fitzgerald, it's a very, very young wide receivers room. Just 5 kept on the 53-man roster. We'll get into that, as well as what head coach Steve Wilks believes is the identity of his 2018 team. And, of course, your social media questions as well, using the hashtag CardsCover2. That's hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2. But first, the news of the day, and we talked about it, mentioned it. Team on the practice field this morning, and welcome back, Jermaine Gresham. Good to see 84 on the practice field.
Yeah, and you're talking about a guy that tore his Achilles in Week 17. Now, it's not as severe as an ACL/MCL injury, but it's pretty remarkable. Now he's going to have to get into football shape, and you know, Steve Wilks mentioned you'll hear from him just about from a standpoint of conditioning. I don't think he can go out there and play 65 snaps, but Gresham's one of those guys that is a leader. He's a tough guy. He likes to trash talk during the games. They can definitely use him. Consider Ricky Seals-Jones still kind of scratching the surface, and Gabe Holmes more of a blocker and also plays on special teams. So this would be a big lift if they can get him back in the first couple weeks of the season.
Gresham and Marcus Golden both activated off the physically unable to perform list over the weekend. Gresham on the field, Golden working out on the side. Here is Wilks on his 2 players that, well, we did not see at all during training camp.
Well, you know, it's still ongoing. You know, you look at practice today, and, you know, Jermaine looked well. I mean, he was running around, catching the ball. And, again, I don't want to try to throw him out there too soon, him or Marcus, to have a setback. But I think we're moving in the right direction. So it's close.
And I think it's real close with Gresham, because we were out there this morning, and this was the first time that you and I and everyone else has been able to really see him on the field, talking about the tight end. And he looked very smooth, very fluid. Now, it's one thing, you know, running routes against nobody versus an opponent that's trying to knock you off your route. But if there's going to be one player that would be on the field sooner than the other, it would be Gresham over Golden.
Yeah, and, you know, Gresham, to me, has been close. I mean, I think they waited. You could see, you know, how valuable he can be for this Cardinals team. I don't think he gets enough credit for his blocking. And then when you throw a little screen pass like this to him, he has the ability to take it to the house. But I don't think he got enough credit in 2016, along with Fitz, on the blocking on the goal line, where David Johnson had 16 rushing touchdowns. And let's be honest, Craig, they only kept 3 tight ends on the roster. And so you're going to have to utilize those guys. And we know Ricky Seals-Jones will be more involved in the passing game. But Gresham's a guy that can catch the ball in traffic, yards after catch. He's one of the tougher players on this roster.
Jermaine Gresham, Ricky Seals-Jones, and Gabe Holmes, the 3 tight ends currently on the Cardinals roster. Gresham, of course, hurt his Achilles in Week 17 and was one of those guys that certainly you'd love to see him out on the field practicing, whether in preseason or regular season, but to have number 84 blocking. And then that safety net, if you will, for a quarterback. A couple of years it was Carson Palmer. This year it'll be Sam Bradford, but that tight end spot certainly gives the quarterback another weapon.
Yeah, and if teams want to, again, load the box, we know that Bradford's going to get rid of the ball quickly, whether he's in the shotgun, three-step drop. It's an easy throw over the middle of the field to a tight end. Maybe he's a guy that they'll go to on third down. Maybe he's a target in the red zone because of his size and his ability to get off blocks at the line of scrimmage.
Now, as far as Marcus Golden, still dealing with that torn ACL he suffered in Week 4, working out on the side alongside Olsen Pierre, Robert Kimdichie, and TJ Logan. Those four on the sidelines while the rest of the team was going through its first part of practice during the open portion to the media. And Golden, I think, one, he's able to practice, no longer on PUP, so that's good news. But the question is it going to be Week 1, Week 2, maybe stretch it into Week 3 where we actually see him contribute on Sundays?
Yeah, but I think the big news is when they took him off PUP. So now he's been cleared for activities. Again, they're going to be cautious with him. My biggest thing is, yeah, you'd love to see him in Week 1. Realistically, is it come in Week 2 or 3? But you don't want to have any setbacks. In other words, and he's in a contract year, and he knows what's at stake. And we know they're a much better football team when they got him and Chandler Jones on the edge. I think the Cardinals have done a good job in the front office. When you start looking at how many defensive ends they have on the roster, and, Dora was the guy that really played well in the preseason. Unfortunately, he had an injury, so they waived him injured. But for the most part, I think they have a really good rotation. We've emphasized, 8 or 9 guys. They kept 10 defensive linemen and 10 offensive linemen. If you don't think this team wants to stop the run and protect the quarterback and run the football, then you haven't looked at the roster.
And the team can be more cautious with Golden because of the fact that you talked about. You've got Benson Mayowa, you've got Jacquez Smith, who we saw in the preseason, and then the team added free agent defensive end Zach Moore, who has some familiarity with Wilkes, having spent time with the Panthers. So there is another guy in that defensive lineman's room, specifically at D-end, that can certainly hold down their own, waiting for Golden to come back.
Yeah, and Golden, I tell the story all the time. When the Cardinals were watching film on Shane Ray, Golden stood out, and the Cardinals were not going to take Shane Ray. They got Golden at a very good, draft pick. Plays with his hair on fire. He's a guy that can attack the quarterback. He also makes guys around him better. So just getting him back on the field, teams are going to have to defend him. Now it's just a matter of when. But the good news is both him and Gresh are off PUP, cleared for team activities.
Yeah, and good to see just the team on the practice field, signaling that football for real is back. Also back on the field and back feeling better about himself, Trey Boston.
Football's back. And, you could say that a couple weeks ago, but it's real ball now, so I just can't wait. Ready to fly around, play fast, physical, just go out there and get W's.
You feel like yourself at number 33 on that?
Yeah, today I did feel a little bit different today. I don't know what it was, but I'm happy to be back.
Where did 33 come from? Is that just something you've always worn?
Yeah, I've worn it every year since I've been in the league. Not many people can make 33 look good, but Trey finds a way to make it look good. You got to relax. You got to have that cool, calm, and collective. You got to have that to you, and you just got to relax during the week. So Sunday comes, you're not, antsy. You're prepared, and let the rest just fly by.
Trey.
Trey.
I did not know that, so I learned something earlier today that we now call him Trey. More importantly, though, let's get the real news, and maybe we should have led with this because I did have fun with this during preseason with Darren Urban, who wrote about it on azcardinals.com. Boston did not like wearing 38, and he held out for as long as he could for 33, which was being worn by Chris Campbell, their 6th-round draft pick. Campbell gets released. 33 is available, and now all of a sudden Boston is, as he says, much more comfortable. He can start tweeting, get on Instagram, because, as he mentioned, he's worn 33 his entire NFL career.
Yeah, and when we look back at this season, obviously going out and getting Justin Pugh and Sam Bradford and Andre Smith, they're committed to running the football with an accurate quarterback. But you start looking at Trey Boston now. We talk about Steve Keim time signings. This was before camp. It was actually the first day of training camp. They got him on a really good number. You know, if he plays well, maybe he's on the Cardinals next year, maybe go out and make $7-8 million. But this guy likes to attack the ball. He plays physical, obviously played for Wilkes. So when we look back at some of these signings, you know, we're going to have to put him in the top 5 along with the guys I mentioned on the offensive side, Bradford, Pugh, and Smith.
One other number change, fullback Derek Coleman, no longer 48. He is now wearing 32 for those keeping track of such things.
Tyrann Mathieu' number.
And, of course, you're looking for the roster on Sunday when the team plays Washington. You want to know who these guys are. You identify them by the number.
Now, going back to Chris Campbell, unfortunately, he didn't make the roster and doesn't appear that he's going to appear on the practice squad. He probably should have sold that number a couple weeks ago, and he'd have a couple of dollars in his pocket. Now, I don't know what Boston was offering, but you have to offer something if you really want the number.
So you're second-guessing a rookie.
Yes.
After the fact, absolutely. Also, earlier today, captains were voted upon. Head coach Steve Wilkes says he'll make that announcement, or they'll tally that up and announce that on Wednesday. The first real team meeting is on Wednesday. They'll hit the practice field, and then the captains will be announced that afternoon.
Any guesses? I got to think Bradford. Now, I think if Shipley was here, he could have been a captain. I think it's Bradford and
usually
Fitz.
it's what, 2 offense, 2 defense, 2 special teams.
Yeah, so my guess is Bradford and Fitz. I do think Shipley would have been one of the guys because he obviously is well respected in the locker room, a leader. Defensively, I was thinking Antoine Bethea, but maybe it's Chandler Jones, Patrick Peterson,
Corey Peters.
That's a really good call because he is another guy that's obviously a seasoned veteran and can help some of these young guys.
And like Larry Fitzgerald, silent as far as his leadership. And when they do speak, you better listen.
Yes, and special teams, I would think it's Phil Dawson. I know Buda Baker's really the guy, even though he may not play 100%. Maybe Rudy Ford. So if they go 2-2-2.
Or you could just go both kickers, Phil Dawson and Andy Lee. Both very
No, I think you want someone
in
on the coverage units. Andy Lee's been outstanding, and I'm looking forward to him and Aaron Brewer this year. So that's just a guess. I guess we'll have to wait until Wilkes addresses the media on Wednesday.
Craig Riolu, Mike Jurecki here on Cards Cover 2 with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. You can catch it live on azcardinals.com/live video. Also find us on YouTube. Search Cards Cover 2. And, of course, if you miss a show, just download it as a podcast via Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or tune in. Now, in case you missed it, over the weekend, the Cardinals released 35 players on Saturday, 2 more on Sunday, and those 2 cuts on Sunday were both offensive linemen, Evan Boehm and Will Holden. A little bit surprised to see Boehm, considering, well, earlier in preseason, he was your backup center, especially after Daniel Munyer had troubles with those snaps. But Boehm and Holden are out, and the team claimed 3 players off of waivers, 2 of which were offensive linemen. One from the Carolina Panthers was Blaine Clausell, who spent last season on the practice squad, and the other one was a Colts guard, started all 16 games last season, Jeremy Vunovich. So both Clausell and Vunovich now on the active roster, 2 players to, as you talked about, now 10 offensive linemen on the 53.
Yeah, I didn't have Holden on my 53, and I was a little surprised, but I knew that it was in pencil. They were going to make some, waiver claims, and they got 3 guys, as you mentioned. And, a guy like Evan Boehm, now in the last game they had Munyer at center.
Yes.
So at least we know that you got a position flexibility. He could play both interior guard positions. So, Evan Boehm is at practice squad eligible. When you have 10 on your active roster, I don't think we're going to see a offensive lineman on the practice squad unless, it's a fluid situation. You're always bringing guys in. You're always working guys out. So, unfortunately, either you keep the guys to save face when you're making these picks, or you don't compound the situation and you just say, you know what, we made a mistake, or you look back at the coaching on the offensive line. Not here to take shots at anybody, but we're seeing these guys get coached up under Ray Brown. So there's always different circumstances for different players. Unfortunately, those guys are going to have to try to find a home now.
Yeah, the changes along the offensive line, something head coach Steve Wilkes was asked about earlier today.
Well, every time I stood in front of you guys kept talking about the backup. So I took your advice, and then we tried to look to improve there, and we brought in some guys that we felt that had some playing experience, some guys that started in some games, and I think again they fit our mold, they fit our bill. So we're very pleased with the guys that we added.
See, coaches do listen and pay attention to what the media writes and says.
Yeah, right.
By the way, that was said with a complete straight face by the way, by Coach Wilks. No hint of a smile or anything like that. Just, because he's absolutely right. We've been talking about offensive line depth. We know about the 5 starters, and this was even before and then after A.Q. Shipley went down.
And you would have thought, just based on last year, Craig, Wetzel got a chance to play. Boehm started week 1 for the Cardinals. He was eventually benched. And Will Holden provided, he played also. So you would think with experience, some of these guys in the Cardinals decided, you know what, there's other players that are out there that have more upside. And that's why we decided to bring them in from the waiver wire and signing some free agents in the offseason.
So in addition to the 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen, there were 4 undrafted rookie free agents that made this team. 2 of them we've been talking about now for the past couple of weeks, wide receiver Trent Sherfield, and now call him a linebacker, Zeke Turner, originally listed as a safety, officially now a linebacker. So those 2 players we kind of knew about. Wilks has been talking about them repeatedly. The other 2, linebacker Dennis Gardeck and cornerback Dietrich Nichols.
Yeah, and I didn't have Nichols on my 53. Now, if you watched him in training camp, if you watched him in preseason games, I don't know if he's the most athletic guy, but he's very savvy, smart player. He's not afraid to tackle, has his hands on a lot of different footballs, so that was a good pickup there. We talked about Gardeck and maybe more of a special teams role. And then you throw in the other guy, Turner and Sherfield. They earned roster spots.
Here is head coach Steve Wilks talking about those 4 undrafted rookie free agents.
Well, I think, again, I can start with Zeke and what he showed in the last game, just his ability to step up at a new position that was really foreign to him, and we just threw him in the mix. Later in training camp, physicality is there. The guy is smart. He can run, change directions, and he showed up on special teams. Gardeck, the same thing there. I thought he did a tremendous job in some of the things that he was doing, and he earned the right to be here. And then, I've already talked about Trent Sherfield and his play and the things he's done in regards to stepping up at the receiver position.
Cardinals, MJ, have had at least 1 undrafted rookie free agent make the Week 1 roster in 7 of the last 9 years. Coach mentions it. It doesn't matter how you get in this building. You are all on equal footing, and they showed it with 4 guys that were not called upon during the 3 days of the NFL draft in April, yet here they are about ready to make their NFL debuts come Sunday.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you look at the last couple of regimes, Wisenhunt and Arians, they didn't want to play rookies. Now, obviously, they always say it, and you're thinking, all right, this guy's a second-round pick. He's making good money. How is that true? But coaches, the position coaches, that's on the GM and the head coach when you bring in a guy that's an undrafted free agent. And the fact that, Zeke Turner, I remember him playing at Washington, so I got a chance to watch him, but I didn't know he had this much upside. And he kind of reminds me of a younger Adrian Wilson. Maybe Adrian was a little bit stronger and more physical. But you watch Turner play, this is really what the Cardinals did when they drafted Dale Buchanan, and you got to give Todd Bowles a lot of credit there. And then Betch obviously did the same thing with him. So I think they've had a lot of speed on defense. I mean, you look at Ben Wickery, he can play inside, outside. He can play safety. You throw in Jamar Taylor, Patrick Peterson. Hassan Reddick is really good in the flat. I'm expecting him to make more plays this year playing his natural position. But if there's one thing that sticks out to me, speed on defense, and you can't teach that.
Also, the practice squad includes 7 players who were released by the Cardinals. Those 7 players: offensive lineman Will House, defensive end Alec James, quarterback Charles Knopf, running back Elijah Penny, defensive tackle Pisani Tassini, wide receiver Jalen Tolliver, and tight end Andrew Vollard. Of course, the big names there, Elijah Penny, so that gives you another running back at least in the room. And then, of course, the Cardinals right now with 4 quarterbacks, if you count Knopf, and I know Knopf certainly was a highlight for many people in the preseason.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, I don't know how many reps he's going to get, but we know that position there's a premium in the league, and I think he passed the eye test in off-season workouts. He played okay in the preseason. I think, playing in that 3rd and 4th preseason game wasn't getting any help. Guys like Greg Little and Bryce Butler were dropping passes, but you could see the upside there, and we go back to January. They had 0 on the roster, and right now they have 3 on the active roster, 2 likely active on game day, and now you got a guy in the practice squad for the future.
Yeah, coming up on Sunday is Week 1 against the Washington Redskins. 1:25 is the kickoff from University of Phoenix Stadium. 8:30 pregame on the Arizona Cardinals radio network as we talk Cardinals here on Cards Cover 2. Get your questions via social media a little bit later on in the show. Hashtag Cards Cover 2. Hashtag Cards Cover 2 using the number 2 with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m.
All right, so you did your first 53-man roster.
I did.
How did it shake out?
And I had 7 misses, which I think is acceptable.
Anytime you bring in a new staff, okay, and even though we got the same general manager and pretty much the same front office between Quentin Harris and a lot of their scouts and Adrian Wilson, you never know. I mean, I thought they were going to keep 6 receivers. They kept 5. I didn't think they were going to keep 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen.
And go shorter with the running backs.
I'll give you an A for effort.
Okay, that's good. I might just retire right there. One season as acting general manager.
I've been doing this for years, and I got 3 wrong. People are like, how'd you get 3 wrong? I'm like, I'm not in the room. I'm just guessing, but it is an educated guess.
Yes, and you knew the Cardinals were going to make waiver claims. Just they at least attempt to claim players, and they got 3 that now are on the roster.
And practice squad.
Absolutely. And you're going to make changes
so
as
we
well.
got 10 now. They're going to bring in some guys tomorrow for workouts. So that's always fluid. And if you have any injuries and you got to elevate someone, like if something happens at the running back position to Coleman, you have Penny right there in the mix, wide receiver Tolliver. So they'll continue to keep turning that roster over when it comes to the practice squad. But right now, the fact is only one Cardinal, Thomas, was claimed by the Cleveland Browns. So otherwise, everyone cleared waivers, and now that's the reason why they're on the practice squad.
Now let's turn our attention now to Week 1 and specifically on how the Cardinals look at this 2018 regular season and the wide receivers. The 5 that were kept: Larry Fitzgerald, J.J. Nelson, Chad Williams, Christian Kirk, Trent Sherfield. Players not named Larry Fitzgerald have a combined experience of 48 games. Nelson with 42, Williams with 6.
Yeah, I thought you were going to give me the receptions total because there was a time last year when J.J. Nelson, between like halfway last year in the previous 8 games, he had as many touchdowns as Jordy Nelson. Now that tailed off, ball security. People are wondering why did he make the roster. He's the only deep threat on the roster. I don't know how many times he's going to spin it down the field. He could be a decoy. And you and I have talked about this. I like him on the reverse. Now, I don't want him trying to break tackles, ball security, everything, but it's almost like an extended run play when you run that reverse with him. And so when they go 3 wide, you could see some of that. So I understand that justified. Now, he's got to catch the ball. Ball security is a major issue with this guy, but he gives you a downfield threat, which they don't have on the roster. They were hoping that would be Greg Little, possibly Bryce Butler, who's trying out with the Raiders today. He previously played with the Cowboys and Raiders. So they only kept 5. I had them keep them 6.
And those 5, very inexperienced. Asked about that, Coach Wilkes didn't sound too concerned.
Well, experience is good when it's proven. When guys continue to progress and perform. So I don't get caught up, and I told you guys this from day one. I don't mind playing rookies. That's my mindset. I'm going to play the guys that deserve the right to play, and most importantly, we kept the guys that I felt that deserve the right to be here. And, Trent Sherfield, as I talked about him throughout training camp, continued to progress. He showed great things each and every day, made plays in the game, which is so important. And I just love his approach and how he comes to work every day. Works hard, smart, dedicated to his craft.
Experience is good as long as it's proven. I thought that was the most telling thing Coach perhaps said all afternoon, because you went young, you had experience in that wide receivers room, Bryce Butler, Greg Little, but did they prove it? They did not, given the chance.
I think if you watch the preseason, because we watch practice and they're inconsistent behind Fitz, I think Chad Williams showed you what his upside could be. I think Christian Kirk and Wilkes talked about it today, playing on the outside, playing in the slot, learning all 3 wide receiver positions. And then Sherfield showed me not only on special teams that he can catch the ball in traffic. So, again, maybe you don't have the household names or the top 3 wide receivers around the league. No one's going to mention in the top 5. But I think with Bradford's accuracy and these guys running routes and yards after catch, I'm not going to say they're going to be fine, and they're always looking for somebody else. But right now, they're content having these 5 guys along with Tolliver on the practice squad. So I think they can put up numbers, but we all know the offense is going to be predicated with David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Gresham, and Ricky Seals-Jones. There'll be plenty of balls to go around. Hopefully these guys can catch the ball when it's thrown to them between the numbers.
Yeah, and with regard to the inexperience, we've already seen we've got Mason Cole playing center. Chase Edmonds is going to be a big factor in the offense. Josh Rosen, perhaps a snap away from being your starting quarterback. All rookies. Coach Wilkes, he's okay with playing rookies.
The biggest thing there is, and I think guys get so caught up with it, you know what I'm saying? I think, the quarterback position is hard. And sometimes you have to throw guys out there. But at those other positions right there, if those guys have proven themselves to be able to step on the field and they're ready to play, I have no problem.
How refreshing is that? I mean, nothing against Arians. He's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. Whisenhunt obviously was very successful as a coordinator and a head coach, took his team to the Super Bowl. I know Warner will get all the credit, and I get that. But it's so refreshing, and they don't care where you were drafted. I mean, we can talk about those undrafted free agents that made the roster as part of this rookie class.
And if they're ready, and that's the key. They're just not playing these rookies to play them. They've shown they've earned the trust and the confidence in their position coaches, coordinators, and the head coach to say, I'm ready when the lights come on.
And it's not too big for them. Even though Chase Edmonds went to a small school, Mason Cole went to a place where they had 110,000 people watching the games. You look at Turner, he went to Washington, so he played in a Power 5 conference. You look at Sherfield, we didn't know a lot about him. He played at Vanderbilt. The game's not too big for him. Now, I'm sure they're all going to be a little nervous coming out of the tunnel, and we'll see who's active on game day, but it just seems like they're ready for their opportunities and their roles, and I think we're going to learn more about this team in the first 8 games of the season.
And they've got 2 guys to help them get ready, specifically talking about a veteran in their quarterback, Sam Bradford, and a veteran wide receiver in Larry Fitzgerald, 2 players that Wilkes believes can help those young receivers out.
I think having a veteran quarterback is the key in anything. I can go back over the years when certain situations when a lot of veteran receivers went down, but you still had a great quarterback that understands and knows exactly where to go with the ball. And that's what Sam does. So, having some young receivers out there, some inexperienced guys that may not have a lot of game experience, I think is a benefit to having Sam on the field. Well, I think Larry, again, is continuing just to mentor the young guys, most importantly by example. This guy works so hard each and every day. It's just unbelievable. And you're looking at 15 years in, and he's just still like he hasn't, missed a beat or a step.
Now, of course, the wide receivers are going to be talked about until they actually show it on game day, but let's keep in mind that this is not going to be a pass-first offense. At least it hasn't been so far in the preseason, whether that's preseason and Mike McCoy will open up the playbook in the regular season. Who knows? But we know that David Johnson is regular season ready. Chase Edmonds, we've already discussed. TJ Logan. This team is going to run the football. The offensive line wants to have this team run the football. Coach Wilkes mentioned it day one. It starts up front. We're going to run the football.
And we've talked about it. I mean, I know that, the analytics out there, well, it's a passing league. If you can get a lead in the fourth quarter, you want to pound it. The Steelers were really good at that in their heyday, where they averaged like 7 to 10 carries just in the fourth quarter to obviously keep the clock going and to wear down their opponent. Here, it's no secret. And if you look last year, the 12 playoff teams in the top 15, the Titans were ranked 15th. They made the playoffs. The only team that was out of the top 15 was the Steelers, and we know what they can do with Le'Veon Bell and some of their wideouts. So I know it's a passing league, but they have an accurate quarterback. If they can protect him, they're going to line up and run the football. And if you want to drop an extra safety in the box, then here, I'm going to put David Johnson or Chase Edmonds on the outside on a linebacker or safety. And, oh, by the way, I got Ricky Seals-Jones, who I'll take my chances on those 50-50 balls.
And an extra blocker or 2 with a tight end or a fullback in Derek Coleman. Coach Wilkes and DJ Humphries talking about that run-first mentality here in 2018.
It's an identity that we talked about, and I said it. We want to run the football, and we believe right now our strength is in our offensive line, and we want to continue to set the tone up front, not only for us just trying to create a new line of scrimmage, but also protecting the quarterback. When there's opportunity to be able to throw the football and, go over the top, we want to make sure we're giving the QB, that time to do that. So I wouldn't question that at all. I think it does go through David.
You said it's a run-first offense this year. For real?
He said that? That's what it is then. That's what it is. I'm with it too. That's it.
How equipped is this team to do that?
I think we're very equipped. I mean, we got David Johnson in the backfield. We got Chase Edmonds that's been showing us a lot. TJ Logan back there. And then we got a group of guys up front that want to do it at a high level and want to be really good and want to look good as a unit. So this is going to be fun.
And as an O-line, you want to be on the attack, don't you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. If we can get those pass rushers as tired as much as we can, I'm all for that type of game. I'm all for those type of games.
Now, if you remember during training camp, MJ, Larry Fitzgerald was asked about the offense, and he joked that it's all about David Johnson and the rest of us are just fighting for our scraps. Well, he was joking, he smiled, but that very well may be true, and not just David Johnson, but that entire running backs room, but David Johnson specifically, because we saw what he could do 2 years ago when he was healthy.
Yeah, I mean, just watching him on film, look at that hole he's running through right there. We didn't see that in previous years. And his goal is 1,000 yards rushing, if not more, and 1,000 yards receiving, if not more. That's 2,000 yards. I mean, that's not something that is you blink your eye and go, okay. He has the capability to do it. He's motivated. Obviously, he wants to get a long-term deal, which I think both parties would like to get something done eventually. And then you look at just the fact that he's got a fullback. I mean, look how he's running here, and he's motivated. And I think we've watched some of those practices where that play that he had against the Chargers is 2 back-to-back 14-yard runs. He's done that in practice where he scores a touchdown, and he's really good on the goal line, as you see right here. And I think they have the mentality up front. When you hear Humphrey say, want to, you go to any offensive line group, let's run the football. Don't put us out there with 5- and 7-step drops where the quarterback's going to get hit and everyone blames the offensive line. Let's line up and run the football, and that is really about physicality and mentally.
Well, in the interior of that offensive line, specifically, we're going to still learn what Mason Cole does best, but when you look at Mike Iupati and Justin Pugh as far as the guards are concerned, Iupati has a multiple-time Pro Bowler because of what they were able to do in San Francisco as far as running the football. Justin Pugh is a much better run blocker than he is pass protection. This offensive line, especially those 3 guys inside, can certainly do a lot of damage to get the defensive linemen on their heels.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but on paper, the feeling is around here that between Pugh and Iupati, they could be one of the better tandems at the guard position. Now, we'll see how the rookie shakes out, but again, I don't think it's too big for him. He's making the line calls. He's going to have to go against some really good defensive linemen this week in Washington and week 2 and then week 3. Obviously with the Bears now with Mack and Roquan Smith. But for the most part, they just want to line up and run the football. And I just love the mentality when you start thinking about that, because it can drain. See, I think that's really where Wilkes' background is, knowing that if you shut a team down running the ball, you're saying, hey, we got more firepower than you. We're going to bring our hard hat on game day.
And we know what David Johnson can do. We've seen what Chase Edmonds is capable of doing, and he's just a little bit different of a running back, maybe a little bit shiftier, maybe a little bit more speed, like a TJ Logan, that breakaway speed. But Chase Edmonds, they are going to find a way to get him on the field because of what he's shown in preseason. Didn't play a lot, but when the ball was in his hands, especially that 4th and goal in that opener against the Chargers, where it was 2nd, 3rd, 4th effort, he has been the most impressive rookie to me because of where he came from. Small school, not quite, big in stature, but he plays big. And as you talked about, the stage isn't big for him.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that first game where we're seeing the highlight right now where he never touched his elbow, never touched the ground, his knee never touched the ground. That was the 3rd, 4th, 5th effort, and that's what you're going to get from a guy from a small school. I mean, he's been doubted. He wasn't really highly recruited, and what I like about him is we talk about change of pace back. He's not David Johnson. He's not going to try to run through you. He's going to try to run around you, and if you try to arm tackle him, just based on the highlights we're showing right in the last couple of minutes, you're not going to be able to arm tackle him. He gets to that second layer. He's got some moves. So I really like the rotation at the running back position. And then you throw in TJ Logan. He's another guy who can take it to the house. But the blocking up front is going to really jumpstart this Cardinal offense based on what they do in the run game.
And it'll be interesting to see how much we see two backs. Now, I'm not talking about fullback, but two backs on the field at the same time, whether lined up in the backfield together or one split wide or in the slot, because I think that's a wrinkle that we saw a handful of times during training camp. Not too much in the preseason, but certainly an option for Mike McCoy.
I think it's going to be based on down and distance and what the defense is playing. If somebody wants to go out there and they want to play a 4-3 and play their safeties deep, then you're going to see them try to run the ball. And then who goes in motion? Is it David Johnson? Is it Chase Edmonds? I agree with you. I do think we're going to see some two-back sets, but a lot of it's going to be dictated on down and distance and what formation they're going against when it comes to the opponent.
This is Cards Cover 2. Craig Riolu and Mike Jurecki here with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. Catch us live on azcardinals.com/live video. Also find us on YouTube. Search Cards Cover 2. And, of course, you can download it via a podcast, via Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or TuneIn. And, of course, we always invite your comments, your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2. Hashtag CardsCover2 using the number 2. It's time out now for the Bird Gang to sound off as we take a look at what is making, well, social media active on this Monday. Let's first start, MJ, on Twitter, and something we already kind of talked about a little bit. A user wants to know about the wide receiver room, if because of their youth, if they're going to be able to hold up, especially knowing that there's a big difference between preseason and regular season.
Yeah, I mean, these guys have had 2,000 reps easy in off-season workouts, training camp, and throwing the preseason games. I mean, there's going to be some growing pains, but ball security is what, when you look up the word wide receiver, it's catch the football. Get off press coverage, run good routes. The ball's going to be there from Bradford. So it's going to be a work in progress, but they're not just going to rely on one guy. I mean, I think I think Chad Williams, I think Christian Kirk, they're going to have roles in this offense. And then Trent Sherfield, maybe more on teams. J.J. Nelson, your D threat. So it's going to be a work in progress, but they're not just going to rely on one guy, and that's Larry Fitzgerald.
Staying with Twitter, a user wants to know about game day and how many quarterbacks the Cardinals might have active. They've got 3 on the roster, but not all 3, I would expect, to be active on game day.
Yeah, unless somebody has an injury or they're worried about maybe a guy not finishing the game. Now, I got to think 2 are active. Now,
we know Sam Bradford. Who's number 2?
It's a great question. I mean, Mike Glennon has experience. I'd be curious to see what the depth chart looks like when they send out the press release. And Josh Rosen has been the backup quarterback pretty much the entire offseason, and he's one play away from getting in there. Again, another guy that's had 2,000 reps, off-season workouts, preseason, and practice itself. So we'll find out on Wednesday who the backup is, but Rosen's been the backup. But Mike Glennon does have NFL experience, so they'll make the right decision, but it's just you can't afford to dress 3 quarterbacks on game day.
Last one from Twitter. User wants to know if you're surprised that Boehm, Holden, and Campbell, former draft picks, not on the roster or practice squad.
Boehm is eligible for the practice squad. Unfortunately, they have 10 on the active roster, so I don't see him bringing him. I had him making the roster. I thought he'd be the backup center, probably the backup guard. But Daniel Munner obviously, had some miscues in that first preseason game. He was able to, satisfy the coaching staff that he's worthy of keeping. I didn't have Holden making the roster. I thought he needed to get a little bit stronger in the weight room. And Chris Campbell was just up and down. They were hoping more from him from a special team standpoint, and he never really showed that. And right now, I don't see him on the practice squad. Things can change. We talk about how fluid that is. So I'm surprised at Boehm, but I understand. They went out and got some other guys. You mentioned one guy started 16 games last year for the Colts at guard. So they went out and got some guys that think a little bit more can help them, and you got to have depth on the roster because no injuries do occur.
Yeah, the Colts from the Colts was Jeremy Vunovich, 16 games at left guard last season, so some added experience in that offensive line room. Also, let's go to Instagram, and this I found interesting. It's a good question. Do you think the Cardinals will sign a veteran receiver? And I'll be honest with you, MJ, I'm a little surprised they did not. Now, I don't know if they attempted to and were not awarded a waiver claim, but the only wide receiver outside of the 53 on the practice squad is Jalen Tolliver.
Yeah, and there were 4 guys that cleared waivers. Martavius Bryant looks like he's facing another suspension. The Raiders gave up a 3rd-round pick for him. Corey Coleman, a former 1st-round pick, got traded to Buffalo. He cleared waivers. Bashard Perryman, he's working out with the Jets today. He cleared waivers. So, I mean, the grass isn't always greener. Plus, you got to come in here and learn 3 different wide receiver positions. It's a complex playbook. So, listen, if there's somebody out there they think they can help them, they can poach somebody off somebody else's practice squad, but he's not going to contribute right away like you have on the current roster.
Speaking of receivers.
And Dez Bryant's still out there. I'll pass.
Yes. A big exclamation point on that one. On the tight end position, Instagram user wants to know about Ricky Seals-Jones and how they perhaps Seals-Jones be a dominant tight end this year.
Well, he's going to have to become a better blocker. He's working in that area, but clearly he's a matchup issue for defensive coordinators and opposing players. He's my breakout player on offense this year. We'll see how many times he gets targeted, but I'll take my chances, I mentioned earlier, on those 50-50 balls. Great red zone target. He's got the height and speed. I think him and Gresham will share time. I think Gresham's a much better all-around player just because he's got more experience. Gresham's really good in the blocking game. He can catch the ball in the open field. He can catch in traffic. But I like the rotation at the tight end position, and Gabe Holmes probably is going to make his mark on special teams.
Let's go to defense for the last question here via Instagram. What is your opinion of Robert Kimdichie?
Well, I have him as my breakout player. Time is up. I mean, yeah, they own his rights for the next couple of years. He's had some freak injuries. He had the high ankle sprain that lingered. He had the calf strain that lingered. Now, he wasn't practicing today. I got to think he'll be on the injury report, but they are counting on him this year. He's playing his natural position, having Chandler Jones and eventually Marcus Golden back and Corey Peters and Olsen Pierre and Rodney Gunter. They're going to be pushing for playing time. So as long as he can stay healthy and cuts down on the mental errors, no jumping off sides, watch the ball, I think he's going to have a good year. Now, is he going to fill up the stat sheet? Normally you don't from the defensive tackle position, but I want him to create havoc. I want him to be explosive at the point of attack.
Yeah, he'll get his first opportunity, knock on wood, on Sunday against Washington. Certainly appreciate the Bird Gang for sounding off here on Cards Covered 2. We do it every show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hashtag Cards Covered 2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show via social media. Wednesday, the first real big practice of the week on game week. It's going to be busy, and this now, we're right in the mix of it. This is where 2018 officially begins, that game plan preparation, Wednesday's practice, and then Thursday as well. But Wednesday is the big day.
Yeah, I think this team is so excited to get to week 1 just to see where they are. And, usually the coaches put the game plan together on Monday. By Monday night, you have it. I got to anticipate guys will be at the facility tomorrow to start looking at the install. They'll have a walkthrough before we get out there, install on Wednesday. And then now the bullets are flying. And we talked about the importance of this team getting off to a good start. We know 5 of the final 8 are on the road. We talked about the brutal road schedule. They got the Redskins. They go to L.A. Hopefully they can try to pull off the upset there, and they come back here and play the Bears. And so if you can get off to a good start, it's going to go a long way when it comes to the regular season record.
Hey, if you missed any part of today's show, just download it as a podcast via Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or TuneIn. Special thanks to those behind the scenes: Tim Delaney, Jim Omahundro, Devin Henry, Jeremy Schnell, plus Grant Greeley, Jonathan Hayward, Brandon Natus, and Jackson Sipes. We'll be back with you, Craig Riolu, Mike Drecke, Cards Covered 2 on Wednesday afternoon.